Okay, guys, we're going to talk about converting fractions to decimals to percents. And this topic is probably pretty familiar to you. Just if you think back to our basketball unit, we were converting fractions to decimals to percents. So our song is going to help us. So here it goes. Ready? Da-na-na-na, 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 da-na-na-na. Divide the numerator by denominator. Move it two places to get a percent. Da-na-na-na, 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 da-na-na-na. Okay, so we're going to go through the same steps we practiced in our last lesson about changing the fraction to the decimal. And there's a couple different ways we can do it. We've talked about a couple of strategies where if you have a fraction that has a denominator of 10 or 100, for example, a problem like this, 2/10, right? I can change this into a decimal pretty quickly. 2/10 would be written like this, okay? Now, this one says move it two places to get a percent, right? So that's our second step. When I'm doing that, so here's why we move it two places. Technically, moving the two places is just a shortcut. So the reason you're moving it two places is that you're actually multiplying it times 100. Now, why 100? If you took a test and you got everything right, you would get 100%. So every percent, you're thinking about your whole as being 100, right? So what we're going to do to change this to a decimal is actually multiply this by 100. So if we think about this, if I was going to multiply that number times 100, let's go ahead and do it. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. And then 0, 0, 0, 0, because this is our magic 0. Add it up, 0, 0, 2, 0, right? Now, our decimal is one place behind the decimal, or is one place behind in our whole problem. So our decimal will actually go right there. So that's telling us that it would be 20%. Okay? So that's what you're doing. That's why we're multiplying it by 100. Now, in order to get this, there is a shortcut. So instead of multiplying it by 100 and showing your work this way, all you need to do is take this decimal and move it two places. Now, it's a little tricky on this one because there's not anything here. However, we know that there are an infinite number of zeros after. We just don't write them all because we don't always need them. So for this, we can see that our percent is 20%. So instead of doing all of this work over here, you can actually just move your decimal two places. But this is the why this actually works, okay? Let's try another one. What if I had 42 hundredths? Okay, so 42 hundredths. If I was going to write this as a decimal, I'd have 0.42 or 42 hundredths, right? So now, to change this into a percent, we could do the same thing we did before. We could multiply it by 100, right? So 0, 0, 2, magic 0, 0, 0, 4, 0, 0, 2, 4. Okay, so, and then we know that I have 2 places behind the decimal, 1, 2, so my decimal goes there. So it's going to be 42%. But again, we don't have to do all of that, the calculations. We can just 1, 2. And this is also 42%, right? So this is just showing you how we actually get to this 42%. But again, you can just bump that decimal 2 places over. Okay, so let's try a couple more. What if we had 9/10 and 76 hundredths? Okay, so our decimal here is going to be 9/10 or 0.9. Our percent, because we're going to move it 2 places, so this would be 90%. Okay, for this one, we're going to write it as a decimal, 76 hundredths. So 76 hundredths. And then to move the decimal 2 places, we're going to get 76%. Okay, so that would be how to change a fraction that has a denominator of either 10 or 100 into a decimal and then a percent. Let's talk about ones that don't have a denominator of 10 or 100. So again, if we had a fraction that had a number that we could, hang on a second. There we go. Trying to think of problems and talking at the same time is hard. Okay, so if I had fractions where I could easily make the denominator into either 10 or 100, then I wouldn't need a calculator either. So I could then make this into a fraction that has a denominator of 10. So 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. So that would be my the fraction that's going to help me get to my decimal. So 4 tenths would look like that, right? 4 tenths. And then to get to my percent, remember 1, 2 places to the right, which would be 40%. Okay? All right, down here we have 25. So 25 times 4 would get us 100. 12 times 4 would be 48. So now we can change this into a decimal, 48 hundredths. Okay? And then we're going to move our decimal 2 places to get our percent. So we get 48%. Okay? All right, so now if we get one of those fractions like we talked about the other day, where our denominator is not something that we can easily change into 10 or 100, we're going to need to use our trusty little calculator. So let's say I have 7/19. Yikes, that's not a friendly fraction. So I'm going to divide. Now remember, so what I'm going to do to get this, I'm going to do 7 divided by 19 equals, okay? 7 divided by 19 equals 0.3684. Okay, so that would be our decimal. And now to get our percent, we're going to move it 1, 2 places. So it would be 36.84%. Okay? All right, let's try 5/11. Okay, so again, not going to be a friendly fraction to get us to 10 or 100. So 5 divided by 11 equals, so I'm punching in 5 divided by 11 equals, and it was 0.4545. Now, to get my percent, I'm going to move it 1, 2 places. So I get 45.45%. Okay. Okay. Now, if I was going to take a percent like 75% and change it into a decimal, how would I do that? So if I had this, to get the percent, remember we moved it 2 places this way. To undo it, to get to a decimal, we would move it 1, 2 places the opposite way. So the decimal for this would be 0.75. Okay? And then we can do this the same way to go to a fraction. This is 75 hundredths. And 75 hundredths looks like that. Okay? And really, anytime you have a percent, let's say I have 19%, you're going to notice that my decimal or my fraction is actually going to be the 19 over 100, because if we think about a percent, in any fraction, we're going to have part over whole, right? So our part is going to be 19, and our whole is going to be 100, because 100% is the whole when you're talking about a percent, right? And the 19 is just the part that we're talking about. So if I were to do it the other way and make it into a decimal, right? This would be 19 hundredths, which is 19 hundredths. So you can see that it's the same, right? Okay, let's do one more like that and then we'll be done. So let's do 23%. So to make this a decimal, we would go 1, 2, 23 hundredths, right? And then to make this into a percent, we'd have 23 over 100. Okay? All right, so that's the end of this. So head on over to Classroom, check out the board notes, work on the worksheet and the fast check. Please be sure to stop into office hours if you have any questions. I'm happy to do some more examples and help you with any questions you might have. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Until next time.